Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to our side event on 10 years of repression in Egypt, which is co-organized by the World Organization Against Torture, OMCT, the CCPR Center, the Egyptian Commission for Rights and Freedom, the Egyptian Human Rights Forum, and the Committee for Justice. It's really nice to have you all here. And just as a very starting point, just to indicate that we have interpretation for English on channel 2 and on Arabic on channel 3. Thank you so much for this. Since Abdel Fattah al-Sisi assumed the de facto presidency of Egypt in 2014, following the overthrow of the Muslim Brotherhood and the arrest of most of its leaders, the human rights crisis in the country has persisted and even worsened. In recent years, Egyptian authorities have indeed increasingly employed tactics such as prolonged pretrial detention, enforced disappearance, judicial harassments to suppress protests and silence all critical voices, including through unfounded investigations for national security-related charges. As of today, tens of thousands of individuals remain arbitrarily detained in Egypt, including activists, political figures, journalists, students, lawyers, civil society organizations, as well as defenders, including women human rights defenders. Torture, ill treatment, enforced disappearances, and extrajudicial killings are committed in full impunity. While since 2013, the Egyptian regime has promulgated hundreds of laws that legalize repressive practices, human rights violations, and impunity. Since 2013, UN mechanisms, including special procedures, the UPR and treaty bodies, have continually raised serious concerns over the worsening of the human rights situation in the country. The UN Human Rights Council has also repeatedly been made aware of the worsening human rights crisis in Egypt, and in March 2021, a group of 32 states delivered a joint statement on Egypt at the UN Human Rights Council addressing the crisis in the country. And yet, Egypt has systematically failed to address these alarming human rights concerns and has taken no credible steps to implement UN recommendations. Despite claims suggesting that the authorities are implementing human rights reforms, the Egyptian government continues instead to rule through repression and suppression of peaceful dissent. This is why we are here today. This side event aims to reflect on the human rights crisis taking place in Egypt and to provide concrete recommendations to stakeholders, notably, of course, the UN Human Rights Council, which is in session this week, in order to put an end to widespread rights violations, gender discrimination, torture, arbitrary detention, and enforced disappearances, as well as to better support and protect civil society and defenders in the country. Before I give the floor to our panelists, I would like to kindly call on all of you to make sure to stick to short interventions so that we also have the time for interactive discussion with the audience, and also because we've started a bit late, so that's really appreciated. And to start with, I would like to introduce Samar El-Hosseini. Samar, you are an Egyptian human rights defender, and you are currently the program officer at the Egyptian Human Rights Forum. And prior to your current positions, you have been MENA and Turkey research and also engagement coordinator in the Coalition for Women in Journalism, as well as an executive director of the Andalus Institute for Tolerance and Anti-Violence Studies. Samar, 10 years since Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has assumed the presidency of Egypt, what are your views of the current human rights situation in Egypt? And also, could you tell us what, according to you, measures the Egyptian state should take to address this situation? I thank you.
Oh, okay. It's working?
Yes.
Cool. Good morning. I hope you had your coffee, because I think this session would be interesting. In my way here, I was preparing my intervention about human rights in Egypt. But then it hit me. Who likes math? Mathematique. Who likes it here? I don't. Anybody here likes math? You like it? Okay. Okay, so you will be our guy today. Because what I was thinking about is that during the last 10 years in Egypt, what have the repression in Egypt cost us? What is the cost of repression? And this is not a replica for the Chernobyl TV series about what is the cost of lies. Believe me, no. It is just that over the past 10 years, our Egyptian regime has been putting people behind bars, has been using systematic approaches to control media, to control economy, and all of this costs us money. And right now in Egypt, we are actually facing a huge economic crisis. So I thought maybe math would be the topic today. Few months ago, one of the TV presenters, Ahmed Musa, in a state-affiliated channel, said that each prisoner in Egypt costs, or the state spends around 6,000 Egyptian pound per month for each prisoner. Okay? I will not discuss this number. I will assume it's right. And right now, Egypt, the estimated number of prisoners in Egypt, political prisoners, is around 60,000 political prisoners. So, what? $1,200,000 per month. And the average that each person spends in pretrial detention in Egypt is around 3 to 4 years. Some people stay even longer with unlimited time. So I will pick the minimum and maybe we can replicate it in 3. So in overall the last 10 years, I know this is complicated. I made the mathematics myself just to make it simpler for you. But overall, the last 10 years, the prisoners in Egypt, the 60,000 political prisoners costed, or expenses were around $3.5 billion. We're speaking about a country that is actually seeking to the IMF for a loan, which is almost equal the same amount. So the question is, why are you keeping these people behind bars? And why are you costing all this amount of money if you're really paying this money or spending this money on them just to keep your regime as repressed as it is? And this is one element. The second element is that over the past 10 years, there are 45 new prisons in Egypt. The estimated cost per each prison is around $100 million. So, with a small mathematical solution, we can find that there are around $4 billion has been spent to make prisons, not hospitals, not schools, nothing. It's prisons, just to put your political opponent and human rights defenders behind bars. Over the past 10 years also, the Egyptian regime has been controlling media. They bought most of the companies, most of the media channels, media outlets right now is actually state-controlled, and they bought it. I will put a roughly amount of $1 billion. If we're speaking about TV channels, we're speaking about more than 10 TV channels. So roughly $1 billion. I will try to keep it short and sweet, but anyway, I like math right now because it really reflects how much this regime is willing to spend money that should be spent on developing the country, on reaching out to the social classes that need it the most. They would spend it to put people behind bars, but they wouldn't spend it on the right, in the right areas. When our president came to power, he decided that he needs a huge national project, which was, by this time, it was the new Suez Canal. This project cost us around $8.2 billion. These $8.2 billion, according to most of the economists and people who are specialized in economy, they said, actually, this project is nonsense. Because the Suez Canal didn't need another branch, it needed something else. But our president has this slogan, which is, we don't need دراسة جدوى. What is the دراسة جدوى? We don't need a financial study for any project. This was a statement that he said in one of his speeches. The other project that our president decided to spend money on is actually the new capital, which costed around $59 billion. because, of course, Egypt needs a new construction project. Till now, nobody knows what they will do with the old project, the old buildings that they left in Cairo, to move all the ministries and all the entities to the new capital. But our president needed a big project. So overall, the president spent around $100 billion just to ensure that he keeps this country as repressed as he could. The estimated external loans for Egypt actually leaped from 160.9 billion in December, from $40 billion in 2015 to 162.9 billion in 2022. It didn't duplicated, it didn't even tripled, it actually has been quadrupled. I don't know what is the word for it even. But overall, just to keep it, to conclude, the human rights situation in Egypt, I would call it that the Egyptian regime has seized and monetized the human rights. They seized it, they put it behind bars, and whenever they need money from the IMF, from the World Bank, from the US, from some of your respective countries, if someone here, from the EU, they would make a small window in the human rights situation, even a fake window. It's a fake show, just to get some loans, some change, some money going on to the economy. They have been using the word security and stability in order to close civic space, put limitation on freedom of assembly, freedom of expression, freedom of association. I think my colleague here would speak in depth about this. The Egyptian regime over the past 10 years used the word war on terrorism. I'm sure you all get scared when you hear this, in order to execute people, in order to do extrajudicial killings in Sinai Peninsula, in order to do enforced displacement for people in Sinai Peninsula. And if you think that by leaving Egypt, you're safe, you're not, because actually there are acts of reprisals that has been targeting the families of human rights defenders who are living outside Egypt and still pursuing their activism. Maybe 2 days ago, one of the Egyptians in the diaspora, he's an economist, political opponent, he was passing by the Kuwait airport, and they stopped him and they threatened him to deport him to Egypt, although this person actually holds another nationality. But for 2 days, they didn't want him to use his other passport, because the Egyptian regime has a very close ties with actually the Kuwaiti regime, and they are collaborating to put more limitation on the freedom of human rights defenders and people in Egypt. Regarding what can be done, should I answer this now or?
1 minute.
In 1 minute. It could be a very nice game. We can use 2 words actually: stop and release. The irony behind what we are demanding from the Egyptian regime is that we're asking them to stop doing things. We're not asking them to exert more effort. We're asking them to stop pretrial detentions, arbitrarily pretrial detentions. We're asking them to stop limitation, to lift the limitation on freedom of expression. We're asking them to release political prisoners. We're asking them to refrain from the systematic human rights infringements approach. We're asking them to stop putting people in enforced disappearance for a long time. We're asking them to ensure that the upcoming elections in 2024, would be fair and free, and there would be an actual competition and actual elections, actually. And we're asking them to limit the military control on the overall state. The military, the media, the economy, the politics, every aspect. I don't think that military states is still applicable for the current century. So just make it simple and sweet, like release people and stop doing infringements. This is simple. Thank you. And I'm sorry, I know mathematics makes people confused, but I just wanted to give you numbers, not estimations. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Samar, for sharing this comprehensive overview with us, and also for actually giving us those worrying figures. I think it's also shows, also making us wondering whether it's worth investing that cost instead of investing into public education or even other social basic human rights for Egyptian citizens. I think from what you've also told us now, it also shows even further that there is a real urgency for the international community to end also its support for the Egyptian regime and to address the human rights violations that's happening in the country. Let me now turn to Mohammed Bait, who is on my left. Mohammed, you are a human rights researcher, a legal analyst, and currently the director of the Legislative Reform Project at the Egyptian Commission for Rights and Freedom, ECRF. So since 2011, we've seen that the Egyptian regime has multiplied draconian and repressive laws. Could you explain to us how the legal framework in Egypt has been modified and in recent years to legalize the government all-out repressions on critical voices, as well as to ensure the impunity of the security forces for most serious violations, including torture, enforced disappearance, and extrajudicial execution? And in a second time, could you also tell us what, according to you, the UN Council could do to fight against impunity for such violations and ensure Egypt finally abides by its international human rights commitments? I thank you.
Thanks so much, Delphine. I hope my voice is clear. Actually, I will continue for the talking which Samar was talking about the violations. But here I will talk more about, we can say, the legal cover, how the Egyptian regime is putting legal cover for every violation. It's something I like to call legalizing repression. Everything happening in Egypt, all the violations happening all the time, it has a legal cover. To ensure impunity, to find crimes for the politicals, for the human rights defenders, for journalists. Usually, most of the time when the Human Rights Council or the international community talk about the repression in Egypt or about the number of detained from journalists or human rights activists, the Egyptian regime respond that we have only criminal accused person or criminal detainees. We don't have political detainees. And this is true because actually all the political detainees in Egypt, they are accused by criminal law. This is what I like to call legalizing repression. And this is a pattern which is not new, actually. It was existed before the revolution in 2011, in the time of Mubarak, Abdel Nasser, Sadat, even in the time of monarchy. This is something they were always using, how to use the loose and vague words to criminalize person without any definition of the crime, actually. Like we have the crime of spreading false news, it's still used till now. Actually, it has really wide terms, loose or vague terms, which has no definition. And this is constitutionally is unconstitutional. You have to, especially in the criminal laws, you have to use specific words which the person can know what crime I'm committing, actually. Because when you use a word like spreading false news for disturbing public peace, what is public peace? How can I know that I am disturbing public peace when I publish something? And when you look at this crime, it's on the Article 102 piece from the criminal law in Egypt. It actually was issued in 1956. And when we try to search why it was issued in the time of war between Egypt and Israel and France and England. It was a war called the Suez Crisis. So actually, the reason for issuing this law was just to protect the army from rumors and false news. This was the reason to issue this law. Now, after the revolution, this law mainly is used to accuse any person who is talking on social media or who say anything actually publicly. You can accuse him with this crime. When you ask them what is the false news which I published, they don't say what is the false news. Some people who are accused with this law that they are accused of spreading false news in social media, and actually they don't have social media. Like a lot of people like that, like they don't have accounts on Facebook or Twitter, and they are still accused with this law. This is one type of laws which are used now. The second pattern also is ensuring impunity. And there's a lot of examples of that, how they are putting the laws to give the perpetrators the immunity from being accused at any time, either now in the future for some crimes like torture, extrajudicial killing, enforced disappearance. Regarding torture, we have Egypt ratified already the Convention Against Torture since 1986, but actually when you look at the law which criminalized the torture in Egypt, you find that it's not clear, and it really ensured the impunity for the perpetrators because it put some conditions to accuse a person with torture. The first condition, that the victim of torture should be accused, not a prisoner. And there is a difference between both of them. If you are accused, you are still under investigation, you didn't get the penalty yet. If you are a prisoner and you were tortured in the prison, it's not torture according to the Egyptian law. You should be, the first condition, it should be that you should be an accused person. The second condition, that the torture should be for getting confession. So I'm torturing you just to get a confession. But mainly, the torture in Egypt happened all the time without any reason. Not all the time the policeman torture you because he needs a confession from you, actually. Sometimes he just torture you because he don't like you. So if you are accused person in a police station and I'm torturing you but without a reason, it's not a torture. So most of the time, the prosecutors in Egypt and the courts also, they found themselves that if they apply the crime of torture on the policeman, he will not be guilty. So they apply another crime, which is less, called using cruelty. Using cruelty, the penalty for that is just £200. So if you're a prisoner or if you are accused but you were tortured but not for getting confession, in the end, the policeman will just be punished with £200 as a fine. That's how they are ensuring impunity for the policemen for torture. Now, after the terrorism, after the revolution in 2011, and actually in 2015, they issued the law of anti-terrorism law, and Samar was talking about that. The anti-terrorism law is really the worst law you can say that it was issued in Egypt, because not only it put a very wide definition for the crime of torture, one of the definitions for the crime of torture in this law is harming the environment. So if I'm throwing a paper on the street, I'm a terrorist. This is how they are using this law against anyone who is talking. The main other problems in this law that it ensured the enforced disappearance and the extrajudicial killing. They give the policemen the right to forcibly disappearing any person at any time for 28 days. And most of the time it happened more than that. It's not only 28 days. Sometimes some people are forcibly disappeared for years. But it's actually in the law. They give the right for the policeman to do that. Not only that, but also it gives the right for the policeman, if he just felt danger, to kill and to use the excessive force against any person. So actually, this is immunity for the policeman or the army. In like these cases which we heard about in Sinai, most of the time we find we have a terroristic attack in one day. The second day we find that the Ministry of Interior declaring that they killed the terrorists in the desert, and then we discover that these terrorists who were killed in the desert, they are already people who are forcibly disappeared for a long time. They bring them to the desert, put them on the ground beside the weapon, and kill them. So they actually have the immunity. They have They give them the right to do that all the time. This is a real problem because this impunity, not only now, but according to the law, even in the future, if this law was cancelled or even if the situation changed at any time, you can't accuse any policeman who commit a crime now. According to the best law for the accused, it's mainly a legal principle in Egypt. It's known that you can't be accused for something you did in the future when it's already legalized. So that will happen at any point. I don't know if I still have time. Okay. This is actually like few examples of what's happening. Since 2013, the Egyptian parliament issued more than 1,435 laws. This is something so weird. Most of these laws we didn't need actually. We have laws to organize these topics. But this is happening all the time. And most of the time I didn't have problem with playing with laws because we had the Egyptian High Constitutional Court, which was really strong to fight these laws at any point. So you can appeal against these laws in the High Constitutional Court. But since 2019, what happened that they changed the constitution itself. They amended the constitution to control the political system in Egypt. They give the president the right to be re-elected for 2 new terms. And the other more, I can say the more dangerous amendments, it's related to the judiciary because actually they wasted and undermined the independence of judiciary. Now the president have the right to appoint and fire the presidents of all the high courts in Egypt. So actually now the judiciary in Egypt is under the control of the president mainly. The other main, the most dangerous actually amendment is the amendments related to the military. They give the military the right to make coups constitutionally. Now the military in Egypt, if at any point, if the military council didn't like the president, they can make coups according to the constitution. They give them the right to do that if they felt that this will distribute the democracy or the civil of Egypt. So you have this type of words to use, which the military can use at any time and can interpret according to their definition to make coups. This is one of the main problems actually, and this is the most dangerous things I think which happened the last years. I can't speak about all the type of laws which we have now in Egypt, but this is just some examples. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Mohamed, for this insights on the legalization indeed of the repression in Egypt, and I think it's also once again demonstrates the urgency to align its definition of torture with international law as well. Now I would like Ahmed Mefre to address the situation of civil society space and defenders in Egypt. Ahmed, you are the executive director of the Committee for Justice, CFG, and you were previously the country representative in Egypt for Al-Karama here in Geneva. And based on your own experience, could you share your assessment of the situation of civil society, space and defenders in Egypt, and also what recommendations you would formulate to the international community, and of course notably the UN Human Rights Council to allow for comprehensive protection for civil society, space and defenders in Egypt? I thank you.
Thank you. شكرا جزيلا. هتحدث باللغة العربية. لو حبيت إني أوضح أو أتكلم حوالين أوضاع المدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان في مصر والنشطاء خلال 10 سنوات الماضية، فأنا من الممكن أن ألخص ما حدث خلال 10 سنوات على أن هناك خطة محكمة من قبل النظام المصري ما بعد يوليو 2013 في العمل على إغلاق أي مساحة من مساحات العمل الخاصة بالنشطاء والمدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان والمجتمع المدني في مصر. والخطة ديت لو حبيت إني أرتبها زمنياً وأوضحها لحضراتكم هتكون كالآتي. أول شيء بدأ النظام في مباشرة إنه قام بالقضاء على التظاهرات والاعتصامات اللي كانت موجودة ما بعد الانقلاب العسكري في مصر في يوليو 2013. وكانت هناك رسالة واضحة من قبل النظام أنه لن يكون هناك أي صوت معارض لصوت الانقلاب العسكري. وعليه قام النظام في الفترة ما بين يوليو 2013 حتى 25 يناير 2014 بقتل ما لا يقل عن 4000 متظاهر ومعتصم مصري في تلك الفترة في أكثر من 19 محافظة، حتى يوصل رسالة أنه لا وجود لأي صوت معارض لصوت الانقلاب العسكري اللي حدث في مصر. كانت هذه الخطوة الأولى. الخطوة الثانية اللي من خلالها حاول النظام أنه مش يخرس أصوات المعتصمين والمتظاهرين والنشطاء وحسب، بل قام بتجريم التظاهر السلمي. وديت الخطوة الثانية، أنه في سبتمبر 2013 قام النظام المصري بإقرار قانون ما يسمى التظاهر، وهذا القانون أسس لمرحلة جديدة من مراحل غلق المجتمع المدني وعدم إعطاء مساحة لأي صوت معارض في التظاهر في الشارع المصري بأي حال من الأحوال. وتم تجريم وإيقاف كافة التظاهرات والاعتصامات، وتم إحالة الآلاف من المتظاهرين إلى محاكم الجنح ومحاكم أمن الدولة العليا طوارئ بتهمة التظاهر والاعتصام. المرحلة الثالثة تجريم حق التظاهر السلمي ذاته عن طريق شيئين أو عن طريق أمرين. الأمر الأول، قام النظام بإقرار عدد من قوانين ما تسمى قوانين الإرهاب. هذه القوانين للأسف الشديد أعطت النظام الحق في القيام بتجريم أي عمل سلمي يقوم به أي ناشط حقوقي أو أي مدافع عن حقوق الإنسان بتهم تتعلق بالإرهاب، أنه ينتمي إلى منظمة إرهابية، أنه ينتمي إلى جماعة إرهابية، أنه يستحصل على تمويل خارجي للعمل داخل مصر، وغيره من الجرائم التي للأسف الشديد أعطت للسلطات المصرية وللنظام المصري وسعا كبيرا في تجريم أنشطة أستطيع أن أقول آلاف الجمعيات الخيرية والمنظمات المصرية في الفترة ما بين يوليو 2013 حتى 2019. في هذه الفترة أغلق النظام المصري ما لا يقل عن 1000 جمعية أهلية ومنظمة بتهم متعلقة بدعم وتمويل ما يسميه النظام الإرهاب. والأمر لم يقف عند هذه النقطة وحسب، بل للأسف الشديد قام النظام بإقرار بعد 2019 إقرار قانون الجمعيات الأهلية المصري. هذا القانون القمعي الذي أسس لمرحلة من تجريم وإيقاف عمل وأنشطة المنظمات المصرية اللي موجودة داخل مصر والمجموعات العمل الحقوقية وجمعيات البيئة والجمعيات المتعلقة بتقديم المساعدات الاقتصادية للفقراء وغيرها داخل مصر. هذا للأسف الشديد أسس لمرحلة أخرى من مراحل القمع ضد المدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان بشرعنة ما يقوم به النظام بحق المئات من المدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان والمنظمات وإغلاق إمكانية استدامة عملهم داخل مصر. لأنه للأسف هذا القانون لم يكن بحال من الأحوال يستطيع من خلاله النشطاء والمدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان والمنظمات المصرية في الاستمرار في عملهم بشكل مريح وطبقا للقانون الدولي، بل إن هذا القانون بذاته كانت هناك في إشكالات رئيسية مرتبطة بعدم دستوريته داخليا داخل مصر، فما بالك كيف سيتعامل النشطاء والمدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان خلال العمل بهذا القانون في الداخل. التحرك الآخر اللي قام به النظام بحق المدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان إنه لم يقف فقط في شرعنة إجراءاته اللي مرتبطة بالقوانين، وإنما بدأ في مرحلة ما بعد 2019 في ملاحقة النشطاء والمدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان والقيام بإجراءات تعسفية ضدهم وصلت إلى حبسهم احتياطيا ووضعهم بداخل السجون ومراكز الاحتجاز بسبب نشاطهم الحقوقي فقط وليس شيء آخر، تحت ادعاءات مرتبطة بأنهم منتمين لجماعة إرهابية، أنهم منتمين لمجموعات تعمل لمصالح الخارج، أنهم يتحصلوا على تمويل أجنبي وغيرها من المسميات القمعية من أجل أن يظهر للعالم وللمنظمات الدولية وللمجتمع الدولي أنه يقوم بما يسميه المحاربة الإرهاب. وتحت هذا الزعم قام بإجراءات تعسفية ضد المدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان في مصر. الأمر الهام أن النظام وهو يعلم جيدا أن المدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان هم الركيزة الأساسية لأي تحرك مستقل من أجل تفعيل مواد الدستور المصري وتفعيل المعاهدات الدولية وصون حقوق الإنسان في مصر. قام في الفترة من 2017 بتتبع العشرات من المدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان المصريين تحت زعم القضية 173. هذه القضية اللي بدأت بحق النشطاء المصريين منذ العام 2011 أعاد إليها الحياة مرة أخرى نظام الانقلاب العسكري من أجل أن يقوم بتتبع المئات من المدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان في مصر، وعلى أثره قام بغلق الحسابات البنكية، منعهم من السفر، تجريم عملهم وأنشطتهم، إحالتهم إلى عشرات جلسات التحقيق، وفتح هذه القضية كورقة ضغط ضدهم وضد العمل الذي يقومون به. الأمر فقط لم يقف عند مرحلة العمل على خنق المجتمع المدني وتجريم نشاط المدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان في مصر بما قلت سابقا، بل امتد لما هم خارج مصر. لم يقف النظام المصري فقط في قمعه للمدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان في الداخل، وإنما بدأ في تتبع المدافعين والنشطاء المصريين في الخارج عن طريق أنه بدأ يقوم بمخاطبة بعض الدول اللي موجود فيها هؤلاء المدافعين والنشطاء بأنهم منتمين إلى جماعات إرهابية، وأنه يجب أن يقوم بغلق أنشطتهم، وأنه يجب أن يتم العمل على تكتيم النشاط الذي يقومون به، ومحاولة العمل على تجريم أو العمل على يعني إرسال رسائل تهديد ليهم ولأسرهم في الداخل للأسف الشديد لمنع أنشطتهم في الخارج. الأمر الأخير إن على هذا الأساس إن النظام ما وقفش فقط في جرائمه في الداخل أو في الخارج، وإنما بدأ أيضا في استمراره في قمع المدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان واستخدام ملف المدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان كورقة تفاوض بينه وبين الشركاء الدوليين وبينه وبين المنظمات الدولية. فوجدنا بأنه يستخدم الإفراج عن علاء عبد الفتاح في مقابل تخفيف الضغوط على النظام المصري ومساعدته اقتصاديا. وجدنا بأنه يقوم بالضغط على المجتمع المدني هنا في اليو ان ذاتها عن طريق اعتقال النشطاء الذين يتوجهون إلى اليو ان من أجل إعطاء المعلومات حول الأوضاع في مصر، مثل قضية المدافع عن حقوق الإنسان إبراهيم متولي على سبيل المثال، الذي تم اعتقاله وهو في طريقه إلى اليو ان في العام 2015 من أجل تقديم مناصرة في قضايا الاختفاء القسري في مصر. قام بإلقاء القبض على محمد الباقر بسبب عمله ونشاطه الحقوقي وقيامه بتقديم تقارير إلى الUPR في العام 2014 الماضي، وغيرهم من العشرات من المدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان بسبب عملهم الحقوقي فقط. فهو لا يريد بأي حال أن يصل أصوات المدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان في مصر إلى أن يكونوا في الخارج، وإن كانوا في الخارج يقوم باستخدام أدوات الترهيب والتخويف ضدهم وضد أسرهم في داخل مصر لإيقاف عملهم. ده للأسف الشديد ما يحدث في خلال ال10 سنوات فيما له علاقة بأوضاع المدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان، ومن الممكن أن أنا أقوم بتقديم التوصيات لو كانت هناك إمكانية لوجود توصيات. لكن التوصية الوحيدة أو الأخيرة أن أي سلام داخلي إلا بالقيام باحترام حقوق الإنسان والقيام بفتح أصوات المدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان والمجتمع المدني في مصر. وشكرا.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. Indeed, I think it demonstrates once again how so how much civil society is muzzled in Egypt, and I think we can only fear that the repression will increase ahead of the 2024 elections as well. And as you've shown also, that once again we see the use of the law to restrict or if not annihilate all fundamental freedoms in the country. Last but not least, I would like to give the floor to Amal Fati, women's rights defenders who was actually arrested in 2018 and placed under preventive detention for posting a video on Facebook in which she criticized the government for failing to protect women against sexual harassments, as well as to denounce deterioration of living conditions in the country. She was subsequently sentenced to 2 years in prison, and in 2022 a conviction was upheld while reduced to 1 year's imprisonment. Mrs. Fati, could you please tell us your personal experience as a human rights defender and also speak more generally about the situation of women in detention? I thank you.
شكرا. هو للتصحيح أنا اتقبض عليا في 2018 علشان نشرت فيديو كنت بحكي فيه واقعة تحرش حصلت ليا، ما كانتش الأولى في حياتي، بس كانت ولا كانت أصعبها، بس كانت من قبل رجل أمن شرطي، يعني رجل شرطي، أثناء تواجدي بمحيط بنك كنت بخلص فيه أوراق. فروحت البيت عندي حالة غضب شديدة جدا، أولا من تعامل الناس معايا في الشارع، إن هم أولا كانوا خايفين جدا، كانوا مستغربين من رد فعلي لأنه أنا كنت غضبانة، إنه إزاي إنه أنا لما حد يتحرش بيا أزعل. فروحت البيت غضبانة، عملت الفيديو، شتمت، بس كنت شتمت علشان كنت في حالة غضب شديدة، فواضح إن الشتيمة أزعجت جدا الدولة. فبعدها بكام ساعة لقيت كتيبة كبيرة من أمن الدولة جاية تقبض عليا بأسلحة رهيبة جدا وكأني أبو بكر البغدادي، وكان المنظر مرعب جدا. 3 عربيات مدرعة مع 2 أمن مركزي، عربيات أمن مركزي كبيرة، وكام يعني 100 حد كده معاه أسلحة مقنعين وحاجات، لا يمكن هنسى المنظر المرعب ده. واتقال لي كده نصا الفيديو زعل الناس اللي فوق، ما تقليش مين الناس اللي فوق، بس أنا فهمت الناس اللي فوق اللي هي السلطة العليا. اتخذت وقتها على القناطر، لا اتخذت الأول على الاسم، وبعدين اتعرضت على النيابة بقضيتين، واحدة أمن دولة وواحدة عادية، الاتنين بنفس التهم. العادية اللي بيتحبس عليها المصريين كلهم إشاعة أخبار كاذبة من شأنها الإضرار بالسلم العام، والتانية انضمامي لجماعة إرهابية، محدش قال لي هي مين بالظبط الجماعة دي، واتنقلت بعدها على القناطر، قعدت سنة على ذمة قضية أمن الدولة، ولما خرجت مباشرة اتحكم عليا 2 سنين. ولما خرجت بخروج مشروط، انه انا كنت اقامة جبرية لمدة 6 شهور في البيت، ما كنتش اقدر اطلع البيت الا باذن من النيابة بتاعت امن الدولة، فكان طبعا موضوع صعب جدا. قعدت اراقب في القسم زي المجرمين بالظبط لمدة 1 و3 شهور. وكان أنا عندي طفل كان وقتها عنده 2 سنين. كان الوضع صعب مع وجود طفل طبعا. فالوضع كان سيء جدا، بس هو كان الأسوأ إنه أنا خرجت. لما دخلت السجن أنا شفت حالات صعبة جدا، يمكن أصعب كتير من حالتي، وشفت معاناة المسجونات جوه كانت عاملة ازاي. شفت المعتقلات جوه قد ايه بتتعذب، وقد ايه بتتهان، وقد ايه بتتبهدل، وقد ايه بتتضرب، وقد ايه في منهم بيناموا على الارض، وفي منهم بيتمنعوا من المية ومن الأكل ومن الشرب ومن أبسط حقوقهم. في مثلا عندنا حالة زي حالة عائشة خيرت الشاطر، دي ست مريضة لوكيميا، ممنوعة من إنها تشوف أولادها ال3 من ساعة لما اتحبست لحد دلوقتي تقريبا هي ما شافتش أولادها، وده شيء صعب جدا. غير إنها مريضة ومعرفش ظروف مرضها لحد دلوقتي عامل إزاي، بس أنا أعرف إن أنا وقت ما مشيت كانت حالتها متدهورة جدا جدا. في دكتورة هدى عبد المنعم، ست كبيرة ومريضة، من وقت ما اتحكم عليها ب10 سنين رافضين الزيارة خالص. في أمثلة كتيرة كانت محبوسة انفرادي، زي نرمين حسين. لو قعدت أعدلكوا على الأمثلة اللي كانت متبهدلة حقيقي جوه السجن. في معاناة تانية، مثلا معاناة المادية جوه السجن. وقت ما أنا موجودة يعني ما كانش برضو سعر الدولار كده، كان خابط فوق في السماء. بس أنا كنت علشان أشتري حاجة ممنوع أي حاجة تجيلي من بره. أنا كسياسية كنت علشان أشتري الحاجة من جوه الكافيتيريا بتاعت السجن كنت بشتريها ب3 أضعاف السعر. أي حاجة خاصة بيا ممنوع أنها تجيلي، سواء بقى فوط صحية، سواء أي استخدامات شخصية ليا لازم إجباري أشتريها من جوه، لازم أدفع 3 أضعاف الفلوس. فطبعا دي كانت تكلفة جدا كبيرة على أهلي. في ناس أقل أو أقل ماديا مني ما كانوش بيعرفوا يجيبوا الحاجات دي، فكانوا عايشين مأساة حقيقية جوه. فأنا مش متخيلة المأساة اللي الناس عايشاها دلوقتي. المأساة بقى بتاعت أسر المعتقلين اللي عايشين أو اللي أهلي عاشوها، اللي حاليا بيعيشوها دلوقتي بقى أسر المعتقلين مع وجود سجون على أطراف المدينة. ففي ناس بتيجي من الأرياف، ففي حالة سفر بتحصل من إلى، مع وجود ارتفاع أسعار رهيب في الحياة المعيشية بتاعتنا. فبيحصل إنه تكلفة الزيارة بتستهلك فلوس كتيرة جدا 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 جدا، وبتبقى فيها مشقة كمان في السفر. دي حاجة. الحاجة التانية عدد الساعات الطويلة اللي الناس بتقعدها علشان تنتظر بس دورها. التفتيش الغير آدمي اللي بيحصل للناس جوه، اللي هو يكاد يكون تحرش. حاجة تانية اللي بيحصل جوه للمعتقلات، بيتم تجريدهم من انا دي حالات شفتها، بيتم تجريدهم من الغطا في البرد، في عز البرد. في عز الحر بيتم تجريدهم من الهواء، الهوايات. في آلاف السجون جوه، آلاف المعتقلين جوه السجون. أنا آسفة إن أنا مرتبكة كده يا جماعة، بس أنا أول مرة أتكلم قدام جمهور. في آلاف المعتقلين جوه السجون في مصر رغم ادعاء الدولة إنها بتحاول تحل المشكلة دي. This my okay, I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Hamal, but we are coming to an end to the side event, and we have to give the room to the next side event. That's a bit the rule.
Okay.
We are being faced, and I'm so sorry because it also prevents us from having a interactive discussion with all of you. But I really encourage you to continue the discussion outside the room. Thank you so much also, Amal, for your very powerful testimony, which illustrates so much how women detainees face torture and gender-based violence in complete impunity. And finally, just let me conclude by saying that I think what we've heard today from all our panelists is really reiterating the need for collective action that is urgently needed from the international community, starting with the UN Human Rights Council and its member states, to press the Egyptian authorities to cease their all-out repression and to ensure that the situation in Egypt is addressed by the Council. I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.